What's the best diesel engine for both reliability and high horsepower builds? If you listen to a Cummins guy, they're gonna tell you it's a Cummins engine. But which Cummins engine? The 5.9 or the 6.7? There's a lot that goes into these two engines. I was gonna start off doing more of a generic comparison video between the 5.9 and the 6.7, but the 5.9 started back in 1989, and obviously the 6.7 is still being produced, so it's very difficult to compare an archaic mechanical diesel to the modern diesel of today's day and age. So what I decided to do is put together a ranking for reliability and a ranking for performance for every Cummins engine since 1989. So now I've broken this down between all of the different variations of these engines as well. With the 5.9 Cummins, we've got the VE44 from 89 to 93. We've got the legendary P pump that was from 94 to 98. Then we move into the 24 valve where we've got the 98.5 to 2002 VP44 years, and then the 2003 to 2007 Common Rail CP3 injection years. For the 6.7 Cummins, we've got 2007.5 through 2018, which used the CP3. We've got 2019 to 2020, which used the absolutely terrible Bosch CP4.2, and then 2021 plus, which brought it back to the CP3 because of how bad the 4.2 was. So I'm gonna go ahead and give you guys a ranking from 1 through 6 on which of these engines is the most reliable, as well as which one is the best for performance potential and high horsepower builds. So first, jumping into reliability, I am going to exclude the 2021 plus models since they all still have warranty and they're still a little bit too new to truly know what common problems there are that exist and how well they're going to stack up in the long run. So number 1 on the list is the 12 valve. Both the VE44 and the P pump, those absolutely take the cake in terms of reliability against any of the other 5.9 or 6.7 Cummins. They're very simple, they're mechanical, they just really don't have very many problems, and the blocks and internals, the bottom halves of these engines can handle so much power. So they really are extremely overbuilt for the amount of power that they had back in the day. Second on our list is going to be the 5.9 Cummins Common Rail with the CP3. The majority of the problems with the Cummins 24 valve was with the fueling system. The VP44 was a major problem. That was fixed in the CP3. However, a lot of these common rail engines still did have problems with lift pumps and injectors, and the lift pumps did from time to time cause CP3 failure. Most of the problems in the common rail have to do with the fueling system, but outside of that, they're extremely strong engines. Some people will say that this is pretty much the only Cummins engine that is prone to complete engine failure, but I'm going to still leave this at number 2 on my list because I think it is the second most reliable one. If you think I'm wrong, feel free to let me know. Third on the list is going to be the VP44 version of the 24 valve. This is worse than the CP3 in my opinion, just because the VP44 injection pump is a lot more prone to failure. It typically fails every 150,000 miles just because, whereas the CP3 usually only fails when the lift pump decides to take it out. But lift pumps were also a problem on the VP44, and the lift pumps failing would also cause the VP44 to fail, which the VP44 is already prone to failing, and so that kind of exacerbated the issues with the fueling system. Now, fourth, I'm going to split up my 6.7 Cummins category a little bit, and I'm going to put the 2013 to 2018 6.7s on here. 2013 and 14 might not be the best just since SCR and DEF were just introduced at this point and they did have a number of problems. But the 2016 to 2018 models so far seem to be very reliable. At number 5 on my list, the 2007.5 to 2012 versions of the 6.7. The reason that that these are 5 below the last ones is that they're really good engines when they're deleted. The 5.9 Cummins didn't have any emissions equipment, and so emissions equipment was completely new when the first 6.7s were introduced. Even more specifically, the 2007.5 to 2009 versions were very bad. The 10, 11, and 12 are even better. But because I had to split this into categories, I went ahead and put them at 5 on the list, right below the 2013 to 2018, just because of the issues with the emissions equipment. Last on the list, which is coming in 6th place, is the 2019 and 2020 6.7 Cummins, because of the garbage CP 4.2 injection pump that's on there that is extremely expensive to replace when it grenades itself. That's my list from 1 to 6 there for reliability on the 5.9 and 6.7 Cummins. To quickly recap that, we've got the Cummins 12 valve, and I'm including both the VE and the P pump in that. We've got the 5.9 common rail, aka CP3. Then we've got the 5.9 VP44, followed by 2013 to 2018 6.7s, followed by 2007.5 to 2012 6.7s, and last on the list is the 19 to 20 6.7s. And again, no 21 pluses on here just because of how new they are. Now, jumping into my performance rankings, this is where things get a little bit more subjective because it is tough to compare these engines when the new 2023 6.7s are producing 420 horsepower and 1,075 torque, and the VE44 12 valves made a whopping 160 horsepower and 400 in torque. So comparing these things from a performance potential standpoint is very difficult because we're talking about extremely different engines that are 30 plus years apart. And we're also talking about a $90,000 brand new truck that's putting out 1,075 horsepower versus a couple thousand truck that's 30 plus years old at this point. Anyways, with that being said, I did my best to come up with my ranking of performance capabilities and which of these is the best performance engine. Now, I'm not into the competitive sled pulling world, but if you are, I'd love to hear your opinion on what a lot of those sled pulling setups look like. I'm more so basing my rankings off of what these engines can do without requiring significant upgrades or the types of builds that you see when we're talking about 2,000 or 3,000 horsepower sled pullers. First of all, generation to generation, within the 12 valves, the P pump is way better than the VE44. Within the 24 valves, the CP3 is better than the VP44, and then the 6.7s, there is a good bit of variation between them, especially considering the first 6.7s produced about 650 torque, and now they're making over 1,000. But we're gonna go ahead and talk about those as a whole category. So jumping into my rankings, the 12 valve P pump is gonna be at the top of the list. The P pump is just the best injection pump for high horsepower builds, and the 12 valve Cummins, the factory bottom end and factory block and internals are extremely strong. These engines can handle easily over 1,000 wheel horsepower. We've got potentially the strongest injection pump combined with the strongest motor here. So that takes number 1 on my list. Number 2 was a little bit of a tie in my mind between the 5.9 common rail and the 6.7. The 6.7, especially the newer years for that, have a little bit of an advantage just because of the starting point. But the 5.9 does have a transmission that can hold more power. If we think about making a 600 to 700 wheel horsepower 5.9 versus 6.7, it's going to take just about the same amount of money to get it there. The one caveat is the 5.9 doesn't have any emissions equipment, and the 6.7 has a lot of emissions equipment that you're gonna have to remove to get to those power levels. But the 6.7 is an extremely powerful platform as well. The stock bottom ends there have been proven to handle over 1,000 wheel horsepower. They are extremely strong engines, and just throw in your basic tuning, intake, exhaust, and other bolt-on modifications on it can produce some pretty high horsepower builds. And so the 6.7 and 5.9 common rail are kind of head to head on this, but a 5.9 is going to be cheaper to start with. and then is ultimately going to cost about the same to get to those power levels as a 6.7, and so that's a cheaper platform to start with. Next, we've got the VP44 24 valve 5.9s. This is coming in fourth on the list just because the VP44 is the biggest limiting factor on it. Now, a popular thing, and like I said, I don't know a whole lot about sled pulling, but I do know that one of the best ways to build a very high horsepower build cost efficiently is to take a 24 valve and swap a P pump onto it to get a budget high horsepower build and potentially sled puller. The VP44 is really the limiting factor here. It's not so much the 5.9 engine, it's more so just the injection pump. And then coming in fifth on the list is going to be the VE44 12 valve. Again, this is going to be an injection pump and turbocharger related issue. The VE44 just can't support that much additional horsepower. It also had the lowest starting point at 160 horsepower to start with. I know these things can get up into the 4 to maybe 500 wheel horsepower range, but it's a lot harder to get it to do it on that platform. Those 12 valve engines can handle all the power you throw at them, but the VE44 is going to be your restricting factor, and so that's why it's coming in last on our list. So like I said, from a performance standpoint, it is tough to differentiate between these engines because we're talking about very different platforms and platforms that can get very expensive once you start trying to build them. For example, a 12 valve P pump sure can handle over 1,000 wheel horsepower, but getting it to that point is very costly and very expensive. And so there's a lot of factors and variations to take into account here. Quickly, before wrapping it up, when we look at a combination of reliability and performance potential, number one on the list has to go to the P pump 12 valve. Anyways, guys, that wraps it up for this video. Feel free to comment down below and let me know if you think any of my rankings are wrong, or if you want to provide some info on some crazy horsepower builds that you've seen out of some Cummins engines. We'd appreciate hearing feedback from you guys and getting your thoughts on all of this as well, because some of this is based on my opinion, and so I'd love to hear yours as well. If you guys appreciate this, please click the like button, subscribe to the channel, and stay tuned for future content.